Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the ongoing war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. And today, we're going to zoom right in and we're going to look at our continued coverage of the fighting that is taking place near Bakhmut. We're going to have a look at Russian formations that are near Bakhmut, that are operating near Bakhmut. Obviously, we know that there are large amounts of the Wagner formations, the private military contract company, which I believe that more or less is now a subcomponent of the Russian armed forces. In all probability, it is its leadership, its command elements are working very, very closely with the Russian military, and quite frankly, have been for some time. Now, obviously, we do see the Wagner formations on the eastern side of Bakhmut in this area here. Now, to the south of Bakhmut is where it changes a little bit, and we see different Russian formations operating in this area. So if we look to the south, just to the south of Bakhmut, extending from just south of the city suburbs, some distance to the west as well, you see fairly large components of Russian airborne forces operating. So in this case, you have the 137th Guards Airborne Regiment of the 106th Airborne Division. To the east of the 137th Guards Regiment, you have the 217th Airborne Regiment from the 98th Airborne Division of the Russian VDV. Just to the south, another regiment of the 106th Guards Airborne Division. This is the 51st Guards Airborne Regiment. To the east, directly supporting the Wagner forces, just to the east of Bakhmut, you have the 57th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade. Additionally, operating in this area, you have the 10th Artillery Brigade. This is in Novorossiya, a traditionally separatist unit that has probably been integrated into the Russian, fighting structure of this war. And I would say that at this point it's probably a component of the Russian ground forces. You also have working directly with the other airborne units. You have the 7th Assault Airborne Division, Air Assault Division, that is also operating within the vicinity of Bakhmut. So just not Wagner formations, but quite a few Russian airborne regiments are also taking part in this very heavy fighting taking place around Bakhmut. To the north of Bakhmut, you have the 6th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade. I'm not going to identify these as being separatist formations. Again, I believe at this point they have been integrated into the regular Russian ground force component and have active duty Russian officers leading these regiments and brigades. And we just talked about the 10th Artillery Brigade. We have the 123rd Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade, formerly the 2nd Brigade, the 4th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade. So a significant component of the regular Russian ground forces participating in operations north, south, and in Bakhmut itself. We anticipate that the size of the Russian force is anywhere between 20 and 55,000 Russian troops are operating in this area. Obviously, there are also Russian Spetsnaz, Russian National Guard, that are also operating within the Bakhmut area of operations. Further to the north, again, I've talked about this before, where it we continue to see a very large buildup of Russian forces, and the Russians continue to probe, conduct reconnaissance and force to the north of Seversk, to the north of Bakhmut, and what we believe could be, again, a large-scale Russian operation in the coming weeks and months as we approach and we get into a deep summer. If we have a look at these forces, and we'll just start to the northeast of Seversk, you have the 127th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade, formerly the 7th Brigade, 7th Squad Bars. I'm not sure what that unit is. Again, these units that are identified as, again, are unfamiliar, and I don't believe these are squad formations. Probably something much larger than an actual squad, but nonetheless, this map is designating those units. You have the 237th Airborne Assault Regiment from the 76th Airborne Division, and again, these are forces that are just to the north of Seversk, and I took a great hop to the north. So again, 237th Airborne Assault, 76th Airborne Division, another component of the 76th Airborne Division, 234th Airborne Assault Regiment. And it keeps doing that. Really, it's the green area here that when you click it, it puts you to the north. Again, elements of the 98th Airborne Division, the 331st Airborne Regiment, the 55th Mountain Motorized Rifle Brigade, 35th Separate Guards Motorized Rifle Brigade, 90th Tank Division. And again, these are the forces that are massing to the north of Seversk and are continuing operations against the Ukrainian front lines. The 104th Airborne Assault Regiment from the 76th Division. So again, we've seen elements of the 76th also operating down towards Bakhmut as well. 488th Motorized Rifle Regiment. This is from the 144th Motorized Rifle Division. So again, at least multiple Russian divisions. You have the 90th Tank Division, the 144th Motorized Rifle Division, and they're the again 144th Guards Motorized Rifle Division. To the north, the 74th Separate Guards Motorized Rifle Brigade, the 234th Airborne Assault Regiment, the 30th Motorized Rifle Brigade, 3rd Motorized Rifle Division. We don't know how many elements of the 3rd Motorized Rifle Division is operating in the area, but again, another divisional size formation. The 421st Guards, the Yampolsky Motorized Rifle Regiment, 5th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade, Oplat, 9th Motorized Rifle Regiment under the 18th Motorized Rifle Division, 27th Separate Guards Motorized Rifle Brigade, and finally the 4th Guards Tank Division, a component of the 1st Guards Tank Army. Got one more up here. This is another component of the newly established 47th Tank Division of the 1st Guards Tank Army, and this is specifying the 26th Tank Regiment of the 47th Tank Division. So again, a very large force being compiled to the north of Seversk. Again, we see large Russian formations, not just Wagner formations, participating in the area near Bakhmut. If we go further to the south, near another hot point of contention is Avdiivka. It looks like the Russians are attempting to surround Avdiivka, and instead of trying to directly attack these fortified positions to the east and just to the north and southeast of the city. So you have a fairly large element of Russian forces to the south of the city, looking to maneuver. So you have part of the 111th Separate Rifle Regiment, 9th Separate Regiment of Marines, the Somalia Battalion. Again, that's a former separatist unit. 11th Separate Motorized Rifle Regiment of Vostok, 117th Motorized Regiment, again of the DPR, Separate Motorized Rifle, the Sloviansk Brigade, again DPR or LPR, 87th Rifle Regiment, 2nd Battalion Territorial Defense of the DPR, and I'm not going to even try to butcher that, 238th Artillery Brigade, 255th Guards Motorized Rifle Regiment, a regular Russian formation, 33rd Guards Motorized Rifle Regiment. And you can see in this area, just to the south of the city, you have multiple regular Russian regular brigades and regiments operating just to the south of Avdiivka. And then again, not as much has been identified to the north. Obviously, there are Russian units operating in this area. There's just no good intel on what those units actually are. That kind of does it. We continue to see operations near Volhodar. Again, these are probing operations. And right now, if you look at what is happening south in Zaporizhia, again, the fighting is just not of the same intensity as we're seeing near Bakhmut, Avdiivka, and east of Seversk. You do have Russian forces massing just to the west of Volhodar as well. The 291st Guards Motorized Rifle Regiment, the 71st Guards Motorized Rifle Regiment, the 143rd Motorized Rifle Regiment of the 127th Motorized Rifle Division. Again, another element. DPR units and more DPR units. And the DPR, LPR, were really the kind of the first that went into mass mobilization. So that's why you're probably seeing a lot of these units, because there has been a lot of mobilization that has occurred in Donetsk and Luhansk. Now, I want to again talk about the tanks that are being supplied to the Ukrainians, namely the Challenger 2, the Leopard 2 main battle tanks. We probably see some Leopard 1s as well. And then finally the M1 Abrams. And we're also seeing other armored vehicles as well, NATO-type armored vehicles such as various forms, British, German, Swedish, what have you, that are being delivered to the Ukrainians, but namely the main battle tanks. And prior to this war that we're seeing now, and as a relic of the Cold War, and as the Cold War ended, I believe that we probably weren't going to see large-scale tank battles between Western equipment and Russian equipment. Now, we did see, obviously, what occurred between Iraq and the United States, and the Iraqis were using the T-72, the M Mike 1 variant. Again, these are lesser variants than what the Russians currently use. So it's difficult to say, well, the United States has faced the T-72 and destroyed the T-72, as have the Israelis using American-made M60 Centurions in their own Merkava. But those tanks are much different in terms of capabilities than what we're seeing on this battlefield. I mean, look, right now we're seeing T-90, T-90Ms, T-80 upgrades, T-72B3. So these are the cream of what Russia has. And in the T-14, that's irrelevant. That is not an operational system right now. We have not seen that on the battlefield, and I don't really want to talk about that piece of equipment because I don't think that's ready to be fielded as of yet. Probably just way too many glitches and problems with that vehicle that need to be sorted out before the Russians can field it. But specifically, this will really be the first time where we will see high-end Western tanks, M1 Abrams, Leopard 2s, Challenger 2s, engaging, quite possibly, Russian T-90Ms, T-90s, T-80s on the battlefield. And this is a very unique opportunity in warfare when at one point we just didn't think this was ever going to happen. And here it is happening. Now, there are other systems that the Russians are deploying as well, and my hunch, my belief is that the first Western tanks that are destroyed, be it a Leopard 2 or a Challenger 2 tank, is probably not going to be a tank-on-tank kill. It'll be an anti-tank guided weapon system used by the Russians. It may be a artillery strike by the Russians as well against these Western tank units. So again, we may not have the opportunity to see a direct tank-on-tank duel between a Challenger 2 and a T-90M. So I know that's kind of circulating in the media, the discussion as well. We're going to see these T-90s and T-80s against these Challenger 2s and these Leopard 2. Look, the probability of that happening, I would say, is pretty remote, especially given the numbers that are initially being deployed. But once they start delivering these tanks to the Ukrainians, and the first batch of M1 Abrams are delivered, and they're going to deliver the M1A1 as opposed to the A2, in all probability, we'll probably see more, especially M1A1s, being delivered to the Ukrainians because there's just more of them. The U.S. has vast stockpiles of these M1A1s, and my hunch is they're refurbishing and cleaning up some of these M1A1s that are in storage and are in the process of trying to deliver them to the Ukrainians. So once the first batch has been delivered, the door is open. The door is wide open, and we'll probably see more Abrams types of tanks being delivered to the Ukrainians. But again, as they're deployed to the front, the probability that we'll see these tank-on-tank duels, I say at this point, is much less than we'll see, again, Russian anti-tank systems, Russian artillery systems engaging these Western-provided tanks to the Ukrainians. And these tanks are not invulnerable. They're classified as heavy tanks. Well, because they are heavy, they're much heavier than their Russian counterparts. You're looking at tanks that are anywhere from the high 50s up towards 70 tons when you look at the Challenger 2, depending on the variant and type of Challenger 2 that was handed over to the Ukrainians. So, again, they outweigh Russian tanks by about 20 tons, and much of that is armor. And the frontal aspect of these tanks are incredibly heavily armored. The side aspect, not so much. I don't believe even really any or most Russian anti-tank guided weapon systems, if they hit the rear deck of the tank, and I'm talking about the rear hull where the power pack is, it's going to penetrate that. It's going to probably disable the tank. It's going to achieve a mobility kill. In terms of hitting the side of the turret, depending on the type of the armor that's on the tank and the type of the tank that's being hit, difficult to say. Ballistics are funny. Ballistics can be strange. I mean, obviously we've seen even M1A1s in Iraq that was hit by an alleged RPG-29 on the hull side up towards the turret compartment. It penetrated it, and it achieved a mission kill of the M1A1. So again, these tanks aren't invulnerable. They can probably take frontal aspect hits. How many? Difficult to say. Depends on the type of ordnance being used. And preferably, the Ukrainians are going to put their front towards the enemy. But again, in war, a lot of things changes, and you're just not always able to do that. And you end up getting side aspect shots, which I believe will happen in this conflict. And then at the same time, we're seeing lots of drones being used, and we have seen a fairly effective use by the Russians of new kamikaze drone systems that are being used against a variety of armored vehicles. And again, one of these drones hitting the rear back deck of an Abrams or a Challenger 2 is going to achieve a mobility kill, and you'll see that crew probably evacuate. You may even see the ammo storage compartment take a hit and cause the blast panels on the rear of the turret to detonate. Now, that crew's fine. It may look like the tank is just a complete catastrophic kill, including the crew, but that's not the case. When those ammo storage compartments detonate on the rear of the turret, hopefully they've had their blast door closed, and at least on the M1 Abrams, you have that. It's a knee switch that opens the ammo compartment. It's a blast door, heavy steel door. And again, if there's a penetration of the ammo compartment, it keeps the crew saved. So it may look, and I've seen some of those some of that video footage of M1A1s getting hit in Yemen. And initially it looks like that there's this catastrophic kill, there's fire coming out of the turret, but that's the ammo compartment. It's not where the crew is on that tank. So obviously the tank isn't going to be used for any time in the near future until it's repaired. That's going to take some repair to fix that tank, and it'll probably be out of action for quite some time. But nonetheless, crew's fine. Crew's okay. But it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens next, where these tanks, where these Ukrainian Western Challenger 2s, Leopard 2s go on the battlefield. Is it south near Zaporizhia? Do they act as a fire brigade for an upcoming Russian offensive? Very difficult to say at this point. Very, very difficult. And probably much of that is going to be kept closely guarded and very, very secretive by the Ukrainians. That pretty much does it for today. We'll have more very, very soon. Thank you for joining us today. Have a good day.